Mom spent my money on my sister's wedding, so I froze the account and ruined it. I am in a tough spot right now. It is not exactly a problem. It is more like I am stuck between doing what feels right and what feels necessary. My mom and my sister have been treating me like a personal bank account for years, and now they have taken their greed to a whole new level. I am at my breaking point. I want to walk away from them completely, but that would mean leaving them broke, and I am not sure if I can stomach that. At the same time, I am tired of being taken advantage of like some fool. I am 38 years old, married, and have 2 kids. I have been living in Ohio for the past 6 years after getting married. Before that, I was born and raised in Houston. My childhood was not great. My parents split up when I was 10, and my dad walked out on us, accusing my mom of cheating. To this day, nobody knows for sure if he was right or not. My mom never remarried, so maybe he was just being paranoid. Or maybe she really did betray him. Who knows? When my parents separated, my younger sister Emily was 5 years old. People said my dad suspected she was not his child, which was what led to the divorce. As part of the separation, my father let my mom keep the house, and he moved out. But here is the messed up part. He only supported me. He paid for my schooling, but he never sent a dime for Emily. Mom never fought for child support for her either, and I never understood why. I guess that is why so many people believed my dad's claim that she was not his daughter. Dad barely stayed in touch with us while I was growing up. Every now and then, he would come by my school, pay my tuition, and drop off some gifts. But that was it. When I got to high school, I decided to reach out to him myself. Since then, he had always been in my life. He even showed up at my wedding, which pissed my mom off, but I did not care. Over time, I got closer to my dad and my bond with my mom got weaker. After I moved to Ohio, he even visited me twice. But life does not always work the way you want. Not long after, he was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and last year he passed away. My mom hated how close I had gotten to him, and after he died, she started acting colder toward me. What made her even angrier was that my dad left everything to me. After divorcing mom, he had remarried, but he never had kids with his second wife. He always said I was his only daughter, and when he died, he made sure I got everything including a trust fund worth $400,000. That was the final nail in the coffin for my relationship with my mom and Emily. The fact that dad had loved me more, supported me more, and then left me all his money made them resent me even more than they already did. But the money itself was not even the real issue. Ever since I was a kid, my dad made sure I got into good schools, had better opportunities, and just had a better life overall. Meanwhile, my mom struggled to keep things together for Emily. My tuition and expenses were paid for directly from child support, so my mom could not touch that money. She did use some of it for Emily and household expenses, but I was not dumb. I knew she was keeping me happy, so I would not complain to dad about it. I would not say my mom and sister were monsters growing up, but they definitely did not treat me like family. They were always tight with each other, and I was just there. But I was never the type to be pushed around. I was not just book smart. I knew how to take care of myself. Maybe that is why my mom never dared to mistreat me outright. Now, my problem is this trust fund. Since the moment they found out about it, my mom and Emily have been finding every excuse to get their hands on my money. And let me tell you, this is not new. Ever since I started working, they have been coming to me for financial help. The more I earned, the bigger their demands got. The truth is, I do not owe them a damn thing, but I kept helping them because, well, they are family, and they do not earn nearly as much as I do. Mom works as a cashier at a grocery store, and Emily sells clothes in some boutique. Even if they put their salaries together, they would not make half of what I do. So, I kept sending money. Not because I wanted to, but because I felt obligated. We are not close emotionally, but they never outright disrespected me, so I convinced myself it was the right thing to do. A couple of months ago, Mom called me up, saying she needed money to fix the house. She went on and on about how the walls were falling apart, the ceiling was cracked, and the floors were damaged. She said ever since Dad moved out, the place had never been painted or renovated, and the electrical wiring was practically ancient. She claimed the house was falling apart. She even said that during storms and heavy rain, she and Emily were scared the roof might collapse on them. She told me she went to the bank to get a loan, but the interest rates were way too high. I knew where this was going. She was hinting at me sending her the money. She wanted me to pay for the house repairs. The entire conversation was weird because we both knew what she was asking for, but neither of us said it out loud. After that call, I started ignoring her. She does not call me much, usually once a month, But that month, she called me at least 3 or 4 times. Eventually, I gave in and answered. This time, she was straight up about it. She said the house was not safe to live in anymore, and she needed money for renovations. She swore she would pay me back in small installments. I asked her how much she needed. She said, $100,000. I lost it. I told her I did not have that kind of money to lend. She brought up the inheritance. That made my blood boil, but I did not want to get into that fight. Instead, I told her the most I could lend was $50,000. She agreed right away. Later, I realized I had been too quick to say that. I should have just ignored it altogether, but now that I had offered, I had no choice but to go through with it. Something about giving her that much money did not sit right with me. My husband Jake told me to send the money in small chunks and keep an eye on what she was doing with it. He suggested I activate my old bank account in Houston and send the money there instead of directly to her. That way, I could monitor the withdrawals. So that is what I did. I reactivated my Houston account, transferred $10,000 into it, and gave my mom access to it. She asked why I did not just send it straight to her personal account. I made up some excuse. Really, it was Jake's idea, and I was starting to think it was a good one. At that point, I just hoped she would actually use the money for the house and not blow it on something else. But honestly, I was not very hopeful. My husband suggested that I send the money in parts and keep an eye on how the house repairs were going before handing over the rest. I told my mom that I would be giving her $50,000 in small chunks instead of all at once. I had an old, inactive account back in Houston, so I reactivated it, moved $10,000 into it, and handed my mom access. She immediately asked why I did not just wire the money straight into her personal account. I gave her some vague excuse, but the truth was, this was Jake's idea. He wanted me to have some level of control over how the money was being used. I figured it was worth a shot. Maybe this would keep her from doing something reckless with it. Deep down, I already knew how this was going to play out, but part of me wanted to hope she would do the right thing. Not that I had much faith in her actually paying me back. It has been 2 months since I started giving my mother money for the house. So far, I have given her $20,000, and I have made up my mind I am not sending her another penny. At first, I thought maybe I was being too suspicious, but now I know for a fact that she and my sister have been playing me for a fool. I knew they only treated me well because of my money, but I did not think they would take it this far. If they had just been honest with me from the start, maybe this would not have felt so personal. But they lied, they schemed, they made up sob stories just to get their hands on my money. I would have never even found out the truth if it had not been for an old friend from high school. Apparently my sister is getting married, and I did not hear it from my mom, I did not hear it from my sister, I heard it from a friend I have not seen in years. Her husband works as a wedding planner, and guess what? My sister hired his agency to organize her so-called grand wedding. That is what she is calling it, a grand wedding. I bet she never expected that I would be friends with someone in the wedding business. I do not think my sister has any idea I even know about the wedding. If she did, maybe she would have at least pretended to invite me. From what I heard, this is not some small backyard gathering with close family and friends. This is a full-scale wedding at one of the most expensive venues in town. My friend told me there were going to be at least 100 guests, 100 people, and yet I was not even worth a phone call. That stung, but what bothered me even more was the money. Where did she get the money to pay for something like this? A luxury venue, expensive catering, decorations, flower set all sounded way out of her budget. I had a bad feeling, so I checked the Houston account where I had been sending the money for the so-called house renovations. The account was empty. I called my mom and asked if the repairs had started. She told me yes, she had hired a company, but the work had not actually begun yet. That was the moment I knew she was lying. Up until then, I had my suspicions, but I was still holding out hope that I was wrong. Now I knew the truth. She had taken my money, lied to my face, and spent it on my sister's wedding. For a split second, I considered flying to Houston just to see it for myself. But I knew that would be a waste of my time. Instead, I called my Aunt Mefather's sister. She lives just a few streets away from my mother. I asked if she knew about my sister's wedding. She said yes, but she was not invited either. That part did not surprise me. Mom has never liked my dad's side of the family. But then, my aunt said something that threw me off. My sister's wedding had become the talk of the neighborhood. She said everyone was talking about how my mom and my sister had been struggling for years, barely making ends meet. And suddenly, out of nowhere, they had a brand new house and an over-the-top wedding. That was when it all clicked. Just a few years ago, their house was falling apart. Now, my aunt told me it looked newly renovated, freshly painted. like it had been completely transformed. My mother had told me the house repairs had not even started yet. That was a lie. And then I remembered 6 months ago, my mom asked me for $20,000 for a knee transplant. I called her right away and asked for details. I told her one of my friends needed an orthopedic specialist for her father's surgery and asked where she had gotten her knee transplant done. She hesitated. She mumbled something about not remembering the name. I asked for the name of the hospital, or at least the clinic where she had it done. She stammered. She struggled to come up with an answer. And then, right in the middle of the call, she faked a bad connection and hung up. I tried calling her back. At first, the phone was off. Then it just kept ringing with no answer. I sent her a text. She never responded. That was all I needed to know. She had never gotten any knee transplant. She had lied to me, taken that $20,000, and used it to fix up the house. And now, the money I was sending for renovations was actually paying for my sister's fairy tale wedding. I felt sick. The money I gave her for the so-called knee surgery was actually spent on fixing up the house, and now the money I had been sending for home repairs was being funneled straight into my sister's over-the-top wedding. My aunt also let me in on another little surprise. My sister's engagement had already been held in the front yard of my childhood home, and it was extravagant. They had covered the place in fresh lilies, set up twinkling lights, and served enough wine to keep a small village drunk for days. All this while they were crying to me about their financial struggles, playing the victims, and milking me for every dime they could squeeze out. I felt like a complete idiot. Like I had been living under a rock while my own family was out here throwing parties and living it up at my expense. They had been pretending to be struggling, acting like they could barely get by, just to manipulate me into bankrolling their lifestyle. That was the final straw. I decided I was done. The first thing I did was cut off the money flow completely. No more deposits into that Houston account. No more financial handouts. No more answering their desperate phone calls. When my mom called, I ignored it. When she texted, I left it unread. My sister, who had never bothered to call me in years, suddenly found my number and started dialing, but I did not answer. They had taken advantage of me for far too long, and I was not about to let them get away with it any longer. I did not care that I made more money than them. I did not care that my dad had left me an inheritance and given them nothing. That did not mean they had a right to treat me like their personal ATM, like I was obligated to support their lies and manipulation. They had played me, and now it was my turn to play them. I was going to make sure my mother's little princess did not get her perfect wedding. I was absolutely right about my mother. The moment she realized I was no longer taking her calls, she turned to the next best person, my husband. I had already warned Jake not to engage, told him to ignore any attempts from her to reach out. But my husband, bless his naive heart, actually picked up the phone. And what did my mom do? She turned on the waterworks, crying about how I had abandoned them, how they needed the money because the house repairs were only halfway done, and how I had broken my promise by pulling away at the worst time. And then my dear husband did the one thing I told him not to do. He told her the truth. He straight up told her that I knew everything, that I was aware she had been lying to me, using me, and funneling all that money into my sister's wedding. He told her that was why I had cut them off, that I was sick and tired of their lies and manipulation. I swear in that moment, I wanted to slap him upside the head. I wanted them to suffer a little, to panic, to feel the weight of their own deceit before they knew that I was onto them. But my husband, being the straight shooter that he is, just laid it all out there. And then he made it worse. He told her I knew about the knee transplant lie, that she had spent that money on the house renovations instead, and that her whole sob story had been nothing but a well-crafted con job. What followed was a flood of calls and messages from my mother, apologies, excuses, desperate attempts to justify what she had done. She said it was all a misunderstanding. She claimed she had taken out a loan for the house repairs and was simply using my money to pay it back. More lies, more pathetic attempts to twist the truth. I let her ramble on for a while before finally responding. I told her I would talk to her, but only if she promised to tell me everything. No more games, no more fake excuses. She swore she would. So I called, and that was when she finally cracked. She admitted that my sister had wanted a grand wedding but had no way to pay for it. That was when they came up with the plan to trick me into funding it. It was Emily's idea to lie about the house needing repairs, to pull at my heartstrings so that I would send them money without asking too many questions. They thought they were so clever. They thought I would never find out. After all, I had not been to Houston in years, and I was not in touch with anyone there except for my aunt. They figured there was no way I would know that the house had already been renovated months ago. I asked her why she had not just been honest with me from the start, why she did not come to me and say she needed money for my sister's wedding instead of spinning a whole web of lies. She hesitated for a second and then said that Emily did not want to take a favor from me directly. Can you believe that? She was fine with manipulating me, fine with deceiving me, fine with scamming me out of tens of thousands of dollars, but taking a direct favor from me? That would have been too much for her pride. It was almost laughable. I told my mom I knew the whole truth, that she had used the knee surgery money to fix the house, and she just went silent. There was no excuse, no more fake stories, just silence. After a long pause, she finally admitted that the house had been falling apart and that Emily's in-laws were coming to visit, so they had to renovate quickly. In their panic, they could not think of a better excuse to get the money from me, so they went with the medical emergency angle. That is when she called me, pretended the doctor had ordered an urgent surgery, and he like a fool sent the money without thinking twice. I kept my voice steady, but inside I was breaking. How could my own mother do this to me? I get that they struggle financially, I get that life has not been easy for them. But that does not give them the right to use me, to take advantage of my kindness, to lie to my face just to get their way. After that call, I hung up and cried like I had not cried in years. I do not even remember the last time I felt this hurt. Maybe when I lost my father. That day I missed him more than ever. He was the only one who had ever genuinely cared about me, the only one who had loved me without conditions. 2 days later, I got a voicemail from my mom. She did not apologize. She did not acknowledge what she had done. She just said, "Now that you know, can you please send the remaining amount so we can continue the wedding preparations?" That was it. No shame, no regret, just another demand for more money. I wanted to scream. I wanted to curse her out, but instead, I did the only thing left to do. I blocked her. I blocked Emily too. I even warned my husband that if he so much as answered one of their calls, he would be sleeping outside on the porch, and I was dead serious. My aunt kept me updated. She told me the wedding was set for next month. I did not tell her about the money, but I knew, with every passing day, my mom and Emily were struggling to pull it together. Good, let them scramble, let them feel the pressure of their own lies. I kept getting calls, voicemails, desperate texts, but I held my ground. I was done being their fool. Even on the morning of the wedding, I was still getting messages. And then, one final voicemail from my mother. She said she was ashamed of me, that I was no longer her daughter, that I should never call her again, should never come back to Houston. She disowned me. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt free. But instead, I broke down. I cried like a child in front of my husband. People might call me heartless for ruining my sister's wedding. Maybe I am. My mother sure thinks I am. She called me selfish, arrogant, cold-blooded. But she never once acknowledged her lies. She never admitted to using me. To them, I was nothing more than a wallet with legs. Later that day, my friend called me. Her husband had been hired to plan my sister's wedding, and she told me that, as of now, the whole thing was falling apart. They had not paid the next installment of the wedding expenses, and the venue was threatening to cancel. I asked her how much had been paid so far. She said $20,000. I told her that 20 grand was more than enough to throw a decent wedding. She agreed, but Emily had booked top-tier catering, high-end decorations, and an expensive venue money she did not have. My friend asked if I was attending. I told her no, I had other plans. She knew I was not close to my mom and sister, so she did not press further. The truth? I was struggling with guilt. For a moment, I actually thought about sending the rest of the money, just wiring over the remaining amount and letting the wedding go on as planned. But then I remembered my mother's last words, how she had cut me off, how she had thrown me away like I meant nothing. What was the point of sacrificing for people who did not even want me around? I turned off my phone and took my kids out for the day. The next morning, my friend called again. She was furious. The wedding had gone ahead, but it had been an absolute disaster. My mother and Emily had begged the wedding planner to put something together last minute, promising to pay another $10,000 later. He managed to throw together a basic setup, just enough to make it happen, but it was nowhere near the grand affair they had been aiming for. The guests complained. The groom's family was unimpressed. And then, because they are who they are, Emily and my mother blamed everything on the planner. They told everyone he had screwed it up, that he had ruined the most important day of Emily's life. My friend's husband was beyond angry. He wanted to expose them, to tell everyone the real reason the wedding had been a mess, but my mother begged him to stay quiet. He decided to take the hit, to let himself be blamed just to keep the peace. And on top of all that, they never even paid him the extra $10,000 they had promised. I felt so embarrassed. Embarrassed for my family, embarrassed for myself. My friend assured me she was not blaming me, but I still felt like I had to apologize on their behalf. I just sat there listening, realizing how far gone my mother and sister really were. My husband told me not to waste another second thinking about them. He said they got exactly what they deserved, that this was the price of trying to fake a life they could not afford. And he was right. Now I know for sure. My mother disowning me was the best thing that could have ever happened, because for the first time in my life, I am finally free of their lies. Story 2. My husband finally admitted that he is in love with my sister. And the worst part is that it was not even some heated argument or dramatic confrontation. It was a casual, drunken confession. I do not know if I should take it seriously or if it was just one of those things drunk people say without thinking. Last night, we had dinner with my sister and her husband, and we all drank a little more than we should have. After they left, my husband and I had sex, and it was different, more intense, more passionate. Neither of us was tired afterward, so we opened another bottle of wine, put on some music, and just sat there, soaking in the moment. I thought he was in a great mood, smiling, laughing, as he always does when he has had too much to drink. We were talking about my sister and her husband when, out of nowhere, he blurted out, "I am so in love with her." I froze. I looked at him, thinking maybe I misheard. "What?" I asked. He took another sip, smiled, and repeated it. But this time, he added more. "I am so desperately in love with her. What I would do to taste her lips. She is brilliant." His voice was dreamy, his eyes distant, as if he was lost in some fantasy world where saying that out loud was normal. I stared at him. "How drunk are you?" I finally asked. He chuckled and said, "Probably plenty." I was drunk too, but suddenly I felt stone cold sober. I sat there in silence, watching as he continued to smile to himself, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just shattered my heart. He looked like he was a million miles away, lost in thoughts of my sister. I could not take it. I got up and went to bed, pretending like I did not hear anything. But in the morning, everything came rushing back. And now, I was not drunk. Now it was real. My husband, me best friend. My partner was in love with my sister. He has not mentioned anything about it today. No awkward glances, no weird behavior. He is acting normal, as if last night never happened. Maybe he does not remember. Maybe he does. But I do not know what to do now. I keep thinking about last night, about how different he was when we had sex. It was amazing, one of the best we have ever had. He was more passionate, more tender, more loving than usual. He kept saying, "I love you, you are brilliant." And now I cannot help but wonder, was he even talking about me? Or was he imagining her? And then there is my sister. She has always been more of a tomboy, never one to dress up or draw attention to herself. But lately, she has changed. Over the past year, she has lost a lot of weight, 25 kilograms, to be exact. She has been hitting the gym regularly, and last night, she walked into that dinner wearing a tight red dress, her lips painted the same shade of red. She looked stunning. We all complimented her on how amazing she looked, and she was glowing from all the attention. I do not know why I am even mentioning this, but maybe it is relevant. Maybe my husband has been noticing her more than I realized. I do not know what to do now. Do I bring it up? Do I wait for him to say something? Do I just pretend like it never happened? I have always heard people say that a drunk mind speaks sober thoughts. I want to believe that alcohol messes with your brain, that it makes you say things you do not mean, but deep down, I think I already know the truth. Even if he denies it, even if he swears he does not feel that way about her when he is sober, how am I supposed to move past this? How am I supposed to sit in the same room as my husband and my sister, knowing that he has thought about kissing her, loving her? How do I ever look at him the same way again? Update. I talked to my husband. I wanted to update sooner, but I needed time to process everything. I finally talked to my husband about what happened that night. He claims he does not remember much, especially after my sister and her husband left, and we kept drinking. When I told him what he had said, he did not look shocked. He did not even look surprised. He claimed he did not remember saying anything, but he did not deny it either. I asked him if he had ever felt that way before we started drinking. He sighed and said that he had always loved my sister, not in a romantic way, according to him, but because she is kind and warm. Then he added that she looked really beautiful that night, and maybe his drunken mind just ran with it. He said it is normal for people to notice others, that curiosity about the opposite sex is natural. He tried to downplay it, like it was nothing, but the way he spoke made my stomach turn. He said he had always thought my sister was attractive, just like the rest of my family, but that her recent weight loss had given her confidence, and that made her happiness more noticeable. And, of course, he was happy for her. I asked him if he had to choose between us, what would he do? He looked genuinely surprised and said, "You are my wife, the mother of my children. I love you." Like that was supposed to erase everything. So I pushed further. If you had just met both of us, if I was not your wife, if my sister was not married, would you still have chosen me? His entire demeanor changed. He got defensive, annoyed. He said the conversation was getting ridiculous and that he hated these hypothetical questions because they only led to fights over things that were not even real. He brushed it off like I was being irrational. Later, after dinner, he kissed me and told me he loved me and that I was overthinking everything. He insisted that he had been too drunk to even know what he was saying. But I cannot stop thinking about it. I keep replaying it in my mind over and over again. Every time I try to push it away, it creeps back in. What if being around my sister is the only thing keeping him with me? What if, deep down, I have been nothing more than a stand-in for the person he truly wants? I feel sick imagining that every intimate moment we have ever shared was just him pretending, just him acting out a fantasy of being with someone else. And the worst part, I cannot stop comparing. Every time he speaks to me, every time he smiles at me, every time he looks at me, I wonder, does he look at her the same way? Does he talk about me the way he talks about her? Because every single time he mentions her, it is with admiration, with warmth, with happiness. Is he like that about me? I honestly do not know anymore. Maybe I am imagining it. Maybe I am losing my mind, but I cannot shake the feeling that there is something I am missing. There is no coming back from this. No matter how much he tries to reassure me, no matter how many times he tells me that I am the one he loves, I know the truth will always be there, buried in the back of my mind. Some wounds do not heal. Some things once said can never be unsaid. And then, finally, he told me the truth. He admitted it. He has had feelings for my sister for years. He said they come and go, that he has never acted on them and never will, but that they have always been there. He swore that he loves me, that he loves our life together, and that he never planned for this to happen. He said he wants to work on this, that we should go to counseling, that we can fix this. And his solution? From now on, when I spend time with my sister, he just will not be there. Like that is supposed to make it better.